two.
Hi, welcome to another Sandeman's live stream. My name is James. I'm going to be taking you round for the next half hour or so. We're not going to get going just yet. We're going to wait for some more people to arrive. So finish making that cup of tea, pour yourself a glass of something. I know I could do with a glass of something right now. This is my first ever live stream. I'm a little bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. Big shoes to fill. Chris Sandeman and Max Dunlop have both already done 2 incredible tours. If you haven't seen those already, do go check them out. They're on our Facebook feed. They're really, really amazing. Today's tour is going to be based on all of this history that takes place in basically just over 1 block in the middle of Berlin. So much history crammed into this tiny, tiny little space. We are going to be talking about a people's uprising. We're going to see some communist propaganda, which is just behind me in a moment. We're going to look at a big old Nazi building, which is incredibly intimidating. And then we're going to talk about the rise and fall of the Berlin Wall. If you know anyone that likes this kind of history, maybe you have an elderly grandparent that likes spreading COVID disinformation on Facebook, maybe you can get in touch with them. We'd love to have people, the more the merrier. Drop their name in the chat. Send them a message. Look, you know how to communicate with people online. That is literally all we've been doing for the last 8 months. So yeah, we'd love to have them. Also, this video is going to be available once the stream is over, so they can watch it anytime, of course. Now, I should say that the team over at Sandeman's are working like literally round the clock to get as many amazing streams going for you guys. This is still like completely in the testing phase, so we really want to hear from you. This has to be a conversation between us. I know I can't see you or talk to you right now, but the more information we can get from you guys, the better. Where are you guys streaming in from today? Don't need a road name, but a country would be fantastic. What time suits you best? I know this isn't the afternoon for everyone, so what time would you like to see streams made? Also, what cities do you want to see us go to next? They're working on going into more cities, but we'd really like to hear from you. So the more information we can get, the better. There is also a donate link underneath the screen, This isn't television, but there is a donate link underneath the box. Please donate. If you feel like you enjoy this tour, if you have some money to give, we'd really appreciate it. It doesn't just go to me. There's a huge operation behind me with all the technology and the new fangled thingamajibs. I've got like a little box connected to my waist. I don't know what the hell it does. But yeah, anything you can give would be really, really be grateful. And it would help us know that we can do more of these streams. Are we ready to go yet? We're going to wait for some more people to come. Welcome, welcome if you're still arriving. This is James coming to you live from Berlin. We're right in the center of the city. We're going to get going in a few minutes. It's about 11, 12 degrees in Berlin this evening. A little bit nippy. I'm not wearing the right clothes for this, I've got to be honest. You know, that's going to keep me on my toes, give me a bit of energy. I think that's like 50 something in American currency, 54. So yeah, it's not the weather for this kind of light jacket, but you know. I've actually been tour guiding in Berlin for about 4 years now. I moved here 8 or 9 years ago, and I moved here to make music. I'm an artist. I'm actually in the middle of finishing a project right now that I'm incredibly excited about. And but you know, I studied history at university, and I really wanted to get a job that would like keep me in touch with the history of the city. The history of the city is very personal to me. I've got Jewish family, so it means a lot to me that I actually get paid to learn more about the history that is so like important to my family. And hopefully I'll be able to talk to you more about that if we do some tours that are more centered around the Holocaust and Holocaust remembrance. Are we ready to go? Or we could still bit longer? Yeah, all right. We're gonna wait a few more minutes, get a few more people. I want to also mention, we're going to talk more about this building in a bit, but a little tidbit of information before we get going. You might see, eagle-eyed people, that there are lots of little dots and marks. You might also see a few little squares of discoloration like this. These are all bullet holes and shrapnel gouges that have been filled in. This is all from fighting in the last days in May of 1945 and the end of April. By the time the war gets to here, it's as good as over, right? It's done. So these would have been battles between the massive Soviet army that arrived in this city to completely obliterate the Nazi opposition, and the kind of last virulent Nazi holdouts who were going to, they were going to die before they got captured. We're going to get going now, guys. Welcome once again for those of you just arriving. My name is James. We're doing another live Sandeman's tour. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. This is only my third tour. That's three. Yeah, I got it right. Third tour since March. So any opportunity I get to talk about history is amazing for me right now. It's such a gift. It's such a privilege. Let us know what you think about this tour. Once again, there is a donate button underneath. And let me know if you've been on a Sandeman's tour before. Have you done a Sandeman's tour in Berlin, somewhere else? Love to know. Have you been on one of my tours? If there's anyone that's seen me before, love to hear from you in the Facebook chat. Okay, we're going to get going. The first thing I really want to talk about is just behind me here, and it's a bit of communist propaganda. It's actually regarded as a kind of classic piece of communist art. But in terms of its symbolism, it's pretty standard, right? It's got everyone smiling, happily working arm in arm to create this kind of glorious socialist utopia. You've got girl guides in blue shirts waving and smiling. Now, if you wanted to be anyone in East German society, you would need to either join one of the two, for men or for women, youth movements. And Angela Merkel, the current chancellor, she grew up in the East, so she would have once worn one of those blue shirts. Now, the centerpiece of this work is a politician greeting the members of two of the industries that were so vital to the progress of East Germany. You've got in the white cap a worker, factory worker, and then in the brown cap you've got a farmer. Now you can see just about that the factory worker is a little bit taller than the politician. That is, of course, no coincidence, right? According to communist ideology, the most important person in society is not the politician, it's the factory worker. Now further on, we have both of those industries represented. Agriculture here with the farming, and further on you have the heavy industry. Now, why is a bit of communist propaganda sitting on a wall in modern Berlin? Why was it allowed to exist through the 90s after Germany reunifies in October of 1990? That's quite an interesting story, and it's got something to do with what takes place on this square and in Germany as a whole in 1953. East Germany is created in October 1949, and it's a country in crisis almost immediately. Walter Ulbricht comes to power in 1950, and he is faced with two massive crises. One is a flow of migration leaving the country. You've got thousands and thousands of people leaving across the East German border over to West Germany, and this is not tenable. How can you grow a country when you're losing that much of the population? So in 1952, Walter Ulbricht, the East Germans, and of course the Soviets, right? East Germany is effectively a satellite government at this point, being a communist dictatorship. It's kind of micromanaged by the Soviets. Walter Ulbricht, the East Germans, the Soviets, they decide that they're going to militarize the border between East and West Germany. This, of course, stems the flow of migration on this border. So now you get migration funneling through West Berlin. Of course, we're going to talk more about that later though. The other big problem is that he has to kickstart the economy. So in 1953, Walter Ulbricht declares that worker output needs to go up by 10%. Now, if you live in a communist dictatorship, your leader isn't just your leader, right? He's also your boss and your landlord. The state owns absolutely everything. So he raises the work quotas. The workers get angry. They're not getting any wage increases. Why am I not getting paid more money? This isn't fair. And what starts off as a worker protest turns into a full-blown worker uprising, because what Walter Ulbricht does, rather than give them more money, he just raises the work quota even more. He says, I don't care what you think, I'm going to raise it to 25%. This turns into a huge nationwide protest. A protest on this square is brutally put down in 1953 with the help of the Soviet army. Around 200 people are murdered. Now, on the floor of this square is a massive photograph of that protest. And this photograph is, of course, roughly the same dimensions as the mural, showing the realities of life under a communist dictatorship set in front of the idealized utopian fantasy version. So would this bit of propaganda have been allowed to remain were it not for the context that this photograph provides? I'm not sure is the answer. This square is now called Platz des Volksaufstandes, and you can kind of like maybe figure out what that means, right? Platz des Volksaufstandes, so place, Volks, people, Standes, uprising, the place of the people's uprising. Now, another interesting thing in this square is actually the building itself. You probably haven't had a chance to get a really good look at it yet. This building is absolutely massive. It is huge, and it is actually a former Nazi building. It is the former headquarters of the Luftwaffe. Why is there a bit of communist propaganda on the headquarters of the Luftwaffe? Well, because when this becomes East Germany, this becomes a very important East German government building. And it kind of fits the architecture, kind of fits the brand of the East German. Oh, we had a little jiggle there. We good? It kind of fits the narrative or the kind of branding of the East German communist governments, because the East German communist regime was as big brother a police state as you could possibly get. East German people, arguably the most policed people in the history of the world, right? Around 1 in 7 people were apparently informants for the East German government. So this very, very intimidating building, which is covered with windows, it sends a message, right? We are looking at you at all times. We're going to start moving a little bit further down this building, because I'd like to have I'd like to show you a little bit more of this building. We're having a few problems with the camera right now. Stick with us. There are going to be some technical difficulties. We're still in the testing phase. I promise you we're going to do this tour. We're going to keep going. I hope none of you have... I know my mum has a little inner ear thing, so mum, maybe look away right now if it's making you feel a little bit nauseous, but I think we're good. Newfangled technology, you can't trust it all the time. Okay, so yeah, we're going to keep talking about this building now. It's massive. It makes up almost an entire block. And when it was built by the Nazis, it's actually it was the largest, sorry, not one of them. It was the largest office block in the entire world. And when it was built, it was actually a massive middle finger to the powers of Europe, because according to the Treaty of Versailles, which was of course the treaty that was signed, that the Germans were forced to sign at the end of the First World War, because they lost that war, right? They were blamed for the war and they were forced to pay all this money. According to that treaty, which you could argue gave rise to fascism, let's be honest, but that's for another day, they were told that they weren't allowed to have an air force. By the way, more bullet holes here, just to point out. They're just absolutely everywhere. You can imagine how much fighting takes place. And of course, on this side here, you have the label of what this building is now, which is the Finanzamt. Finanzamt means tax office. So what was once a Nazi building, then became a communist kind of symbol of oppression, is now the tax office, still a much hated building in German society. Anyway, back to the Treaty of Versailles. They're forced to sign it. They are not allowed to have an air force. So the Nazis build this building in 1936. They make it the largest building office building in the world, and they build it in 18 short months. So it's ready in time for the Berlin Olympics. So the whole world can see it, right? It's a big, arrogant, like brazen gesture to do something like that. And it's one of these moments where you see the Nazis like becoming increasingly arrogant, increasingly brazen with regards to their relationship to the rest of Europe, actions and policies that will grow and morph and culminate with, of course, the invasion of Poland in September of 1939. The architecture of this building is really interesting because it really shows you what the purpose of Nazi architecture was. This building is designed, or I should say was designed, by a man named Ernst Sagabil. He was quite a famous architect in the Nazi era. He also designed Tempelhof Airport, which is an amazing, now disused airport in the West, famous for its role in the Berlin airlift, of course. Maybe we can do a tour down there sometime. So Ernst Sagabil designs this, but it is a really good approximation of the style of architecture developed by another man named Albert Speer. Albert Speer was known as the architect of the Third Reich, and together with Hitler, he would create this sort of Nazi architectural aesthetic that we're about to see as we get to the front of the building, and it kind of opens up and you get a kind of really great vista. And apart from this idea of wanting to intimidate you, wanting to make you feel small, wanting to make you feel insignificant, it also had something to do with a thing that Hitler would often talk about and boast about. Oh, and here we go. Here it is. Imagine how that must have felt looking at it in the early 1930s. There would have been hardly any buildings that even matched this in terms of its scale and its size. It's a real statement. And right in the middle, the centerpiece, you have a 3-story high kind of banquet hall reception area, a place where Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, surely would have loved to have presented and hosted. Hermann Göring was a very kind of outsized character, really in contrast to Adolf Hitler, who was known for his kind of abstinence. He didn't drink, he was a vegetarian. Göring, on the other hand, loved his drink. He was addicted to morphine for a while, or was it morphine or heroin or something like that? He was a drug addict. And he was actually one of the first Nazis, or one of the first kind of famous, quite respected men to support the Nazi party. He was a war hero from the First World War. So him becoming someone that supported the Nazis, it's kind of like Jeff Sessions when he went for Donald Trump, although I'm not comparing the two, don't get me wrong there. But it did mean a lot for Göring. So this was his building. Anyway, back to the architecture quickly. I just want to talk about how Hitler would boast about how he wanted the Third Reich to last for 1,000 years. It was very important to him that he had a style of architecture that in his mind would not go out of style or fashion. So nothing too ornamented, nothing too of the era, right? You don't want to build the mullet haircut of buildings, right? That's going to look absolutely ridiculous in about 30 years. And while this is a very boring building, and it, given the history of the Nazis that we know now, we can kind of look at it and sense evil. I think it does that job relatively effectively. It's just a fairly nondescript building. So we're going to carry on walking down it because there's a lot more of it. Unbelievably, actually, this building wasn't too badly damaged during the Second World War. We are now in the area, the heart of Nazi power. All of the ministries and headquarters were based in this area. So this area was like heavily targeted by Allied bombing forces. And there's lots of like kind of myths and stories about why this building wasn't too badly damaged. Some people say that maybe the RAF and the Luftwaffe had a kind of gentleman's agreement that this building wouldn't be bombed. I'm not sure if that was true. Another story is that the Allies said that they had done this on purpose, that they needed an office block from which to work out of when they won the war. I also do not think that is true, especially judging by bombing accuracies of the Americans and the British. I think the British had about a 5% accuracy, terrible. And the Americans had a slightly better 12%. So I don't think either of those are the case. But it is still remarkable that a building of this size and scale would not be too badly damaged. 7 kilometers of corridors, 4,000 windows, 2,800 rooms, absolutely ridiculous. So as we walk further along down this block, we're going to jump back out of the Nazi era because we're about to get to a stretch of the Berlin Wall. We're still in the east here, of course, and just on the other side of the road that we're going to be at in a few minutes is West Berlin. Of course, the Berlin Wall, when it went up, just went along the various districts of the city. So in 1952, the big main border is closed. That leaves the flow of migrants to come in, funnel in through West Berlin. This is obviously incredibly problematic because they're still losing large portions of their population. In the period between 1949 and 1961, East Germany actually loses around 1/5 of its population, 1/5. And it's not anyone, it's the youngest, it's the brightest, it's the best, it's the people that you need to grow a thriving economy. So something must be done. The East Germans wanted to do this back in 1952, right? They wanted to create a Berlin Wall in 1952, but the Soviets said no. They wanted the Americans, the Brits, the French to get out of West Berlin. They wanted to keep it for themselves. So they held back. But when Kennedy gave his Ich bin ein Berliner speech, Khrushchev knew that was the end game. So they let the East Germans go ahead and do it. By 1961, you have 2,000 people arriving a day at these various refugee camps in the West. The Western Allies are encouraging people out of the city. They're helping them with flights and money. This is untenable, absolutely untenable. So as midnight ticks over, on the 13th of August 1961, 30,000 East German police take to the streets in a completely secretive operation. It was called Operation Rose. And from the East German perspective, it was an incredible success. No one knew that this was happening. People went to bed one night, woke up the next, and their whole lives had changed forever. Within 12 hours, the 155 kilometers around West Berlin, a barbed wire fence was put up. And if you were from the east, for the next 28 years, you would not be able to travel west. Now, the Berlin Wall that you can see here today, which is just across the road here, this does not come into existence until around 1975, right? What starts off as a barbed wire fence, within 10 days you have a physical barrier. In some places, in Potsdamer Platz and I think Brandenburg Gate, there's like a physical barrier. But over the next few years, it's kind of spotty. Oh, we have some horses coming by. I'm not sure how happy they are, but they look cold. I would be as well if I was them. And there's a horse sitting on a horse. That's very meta. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of spotty. It's built up slowly over the years, and it's not until the mid-1970s, 1975, that East Germans decide to fully unify and militarize this border. And I know when people see the wall for the first time, it's about 4 meters, by the way, to give you some sense of scale. They're not that impressed by it. Some people are kind of expecting I don't know, like a Game of Thrones type wall or something, an impenetrable fortress. This does not tell the full story, because actually by this point, you have 2 barriers. And in between those 2 barriers is this area called the death strip. The death strip was almost impossible to get past. You had armed turret guards about 150 meters apart from each other, guards with shoot to kill orders. You had barbed wire, you had dogs chained up, you had a 24-hour patrolled track. You even had an anti-tank ditch, right? The East Germans really thought of everything, like as if an East German was going to nick a tank and try and get across, but cover all the bases. So while around 5,000 people escape during the period of the Berlin Wall, that number is a little misleading, right? Most of those will take place in those early years where you have like a barbed wire fence in some places, a little kind of barrier in others. By this point, escapes are few and far between. And stories of escape are like increasingly unbelievable in their audacity. In fact, one of my favorite stories was made out of this building. This, as I said, was an East German government building. So one day, and actually I should say it was unusual for a building of this height to get this close to the Berlin Wall. So one day, an East German government worker smuggles his wife and kid into the building. He puts them in an out-of-order toilet and he goes about his daily work. He stays late until the office is emptied out, at which point the young family go up to the roof over there and they have with them a bag. And in that bag is a cable with a hammer attached. They are somehow able to swing the hammer over to the western side of the wall, where the guy's brother is. He has a car with him, he attaches the cable to the car, and eventually the young family are able to winch themselves over to safety. Now, that is a very condensed version of that story, but I think it's important to note that these things were happening. There are still these small symbols and moments of resistance, even when a country and a population was as kind of crushed and dominated by its government as the East Germans were by theirs. For most people, though, there was very little hope of escape. Hope will eventually come in the unlikely shape of Mikhail Gorbachev, who comes to power in the Soviet Union in 1985. Mikhail Gorbachev is a reformist ruler, and he will start to pull the Soviets out of the affairs of the Eastern Bloc countries. Hungary will take advantage of this in 1989 when they bring in a reformist government, and that government will now refuse to patrol the border between Austria and Hungary. And this is the first chink in the Iron Curtain, and this is where the clock starts ticking for the end of East Germany. So now, as an East German, there is actually a path of migration for you, right? Because as an East German, you were allowed to travel to the Eastern Bloc countries, provided you had a visa. So you start to see this large path of migrants going through Hungary to Austria and then back round to West Berlin. And what does this do? This encourages people back home to start protesting. And by summer of 1989, you have protests on the streets of up to 500,000 people in number. Massive protests, way bigger than the protests over on that square over there. Can't be crushed, they can't be destroyed. So the East German government reluctantly starts to look at reform. Unfortunately for them, the ruler at the time, Erich Honecker, is staunchly anti-reform. He is a kind of Stalinist, communist. He has no interest in giving anything to the people. Such was his arrogance. He never thought that the East German government could lose its power, lose its dominance. However, there were those in his government that disagreed with him. They make a vote of no confidence, and he is kicked out. They bring in this new guy called Egon Krenz. Now they hope that Egon Krenz is going to be like this big symbol of progressive change, that this will be enough to get the people off the streets. This is very naive. The people don't buy it. They see him as a kind of Hanukkah light, I guess you could say, and they carry on protesting. And now the government is kind of starting to panic, because now they realize that they're actually going to have to do something. And it's around this time that they start to look at freedom of movement. You want to travel west? We're going to let you. For 2 weeks of every year, you can travel west. However, one, you need a passport. Only a quarter of the East German population has one. Two, the Stasi, the East German secret police, can invalidate your application at any point without any reason. We could talk for hours about the Stasi, and I would love to someday. It's an incredibly fascinating topic, but we can't do that today. If you are interested in hearing about the Stasi, please mention so in the comments. So on the morning of the 9th of November 1989, we've got some skateboarders coming past here. Hello. Radical. So yeah, on the morning of the 9th of November 1989, we have this 2-week visa policy is passed into law, and later that day it will be announced to the world, right? Now, the guy leading that press conference is a guy named Günter Schabowski. He is the spokesperson of the East German government. He's very well known to the East German people. Now, crucially, Günter Schabowski does not go to the meeting that morning. He does not fully understand the law. We're going to try and do a walk and talk while we cross the road here and not get run over. Yes, we could do this. So Günter Schabowski does not fully understand the law. He will walk into the press conference that afternoon with a few sheets of paper that he has been handed, and he will read from them pretty much word for word. I should break in just to say right now that we are standing on both East and West Berlin. East and West. Wasn't always that easy, but it soon will be, because Günter Schabowski is about to make an absolutely massive mistake, one that will change the world forever. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day as a tour guide, I like to think of poor old Günter, because for me it's a misremembered date. For him, it kind of changed the political, cultural, social, economic climate in his country and the rest of Europe for the rest of time. So context is good, I think. Anyway, Günter Schabowski talks, he reads from the sheets of paper, and at the end of the press conference, he opens up the floor to questions. He is asked a seemingly very obvious question by a journalist, and that is, when does this law come into effect? Now, Günter Schabowski does not know the answer to this question. He starts umming and ahhing, and in a moment of panic, he reads the date at the top of the press release. He says something like, I believe effective immediately. Now, the Western media, the fake news media, they take this one nugget of information, they disregard most of the rest, and they start broadcasting to the entire world that East Germans can now travel west. East Germans can, of course, listen to Western radio. They can even watch Western television at this point. The government has kind of given up trying to curb that. And within hours, you have thousands of them amassed at the 8 inner city checkpoints demanding they be let into the western half of the city. Up in the north of the city, you have a checkpoint manned by a Stasi officer called Harold Jägen. And he doesn't know what to do. He's got a crowd of around 10,000 people. It's growing all the time. And eventually, he does get an instruction from his government, because the East German government is in a kind of state of meltdown at this point. So he gets an order, and that is to take the troublemakers out of the crowd, invalidate their East German passports, and throw them into the West, which he does. But what does this look like? This looks like people are finally being allowed across the border. So now you have a rush on the border, and you've got a very dangerous situation. You've got armed guards standing almost chest to chest with an increasingly rowdy crowd. At this point, Harold Jägen has 3 bad options. 1, he does nothing, and his men could be trampled and killed. 2, he orders them to shoot, and he could be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. Or 3, he disobeys his orders, and he opens up the checkpoint. And at 11:30 on the 9th of November 1989, Harold Jägen chooses option 3, and within half an hour, all 8 of the inner city checkpoints are opening up. It's done. It's over. East Berliners are welcomed over the wall. They're given flowers. The government gives all East Germans a gift of 100 marks, which is like a small fortune at this point. The first thing that goes out of sale is bananas, because of course they're not very easy to keep and purchase. I've got a really lovely story actually. I live with I live in a building in the south in Neukölln. It's just in the west. It's like an Arab Turkish community, and the wall used to run along the end of our road, about 1 kilometre down the road. And I actually live above a kebab shop, which is kind of helpful some of the time and unhelpful other times. And there's an American lady that lives in my building, and she lived in my building when the wall came down. And she was telling me the other day that when the wall comes down, she's looking out of the window and she's wondering, like, where are these people going to go? There's hordes of East Berliners coming up the street. And you know what the first thing most of them did? They went and got a kebab, because I guess they'd never had a kebab before. She also told me that the local department store, Karstadt, did something quite cheeky. When they realized there were going to be lots of East Berliners with lots of money to spend, they went and got all of the stock that they hadn't been able to sell for the last few years back out of storage and represented it as if it was brand new, in the hopes that the East Berliners would buy it, thinking it was, the latest fashion. But apparently the East Berliners knew better, and they would follow West Berliners round the department store, looking in their trolleys and baskets, seeing what they were purchasing before they actually went and made the purchase. Within 2 weeks, the two countries are negotiating for reunification, and the following year, on the 3rd of October 1990, Germany is reunified, and we celebrate that day every year. This year, it would have been the 30th anniversary, and there would have been an absolutely massive party, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that. Hopefully next year or the year after, we'll be able to make up for lost time, and I would absolutely love to have you here if we're able to do all this traveling and stuff. Okay, we're nearing the end of the tour now. Just before I go, I just wanted to mention one more thing. This is a really interesting part of Berlin that I haven't talked about. This is the topography of terrors. It's a really interesting museum. The reason why it's there is because this is actually the former headquarters of the Gestapo and the SS. So if you want to see a tour about this kind of stuff, please leave a comment in this comment section, because we'd love to do a tour around this. There's so much more to talk about. If you enjoyed this tour, please leave a donation. There's a donation link just below. It would be really great to know that these kind of tours work for us. If you are watching not live, you can also leave a donation. It really helps us to know that this is going to be successful. There are going to be more tours from Sandeman's in the upcoming days, and we just keep looking on the Facebook feed, and you're going to see what comes up next. Okay, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you next time. Cheers. Goodbye.